Today we'll be looking at how did Hurricane Juan affect Point Pleasant Park trees population. Few terms will be used in our presentation. Often will be the climax community, which is the ecological community in which populations of plants remain stable and exist in a balance with each other, with the environment. Evenness is another one that we'll dig into, which is the measurements of the number of species relative to the abundance of the species, and then also the Shannon diversity, which is the measurement to determine the diversity within a community of species. So first we'll look at the Shannon diversity, how that changed over the years from 2004 to 2023, and what happens as that approaches the climax community. And then we'll jump in and look at how two dominant species changed over the years from 2004 to 2023. And then lastly, we'll look at the evenness change from 2004 to 2023 and what happens as that approaches the climax community. According to McDonald in a study in 2017, the area of Point Pleasant Park, which is also known as Tu Kai, which in English means the spirit place or the place of spirits. This location was believed to be the home of the Great Spirit Fire, who gave birth to the original 7 families of the Mi'kmaq people. This area has been celebrated over past years, 7 days a year, by Mi'kmaq people from all over, due to the fact that it was the creation that led to the Mi'kmaq people. And this whole experiment was made possible due to Hurricane Juan that came through the area September 28th and 29th of 2003 that ripped through Point Pleasant Park and tore up thousands of trees, which had a drastic effect on the park, which had to close for 8 months total as the landscape changed. This gave the past students of Biology 2060 and other researchers the opportunity to do extensive research on this area and how it would recover. In this study, we'll look at a null and alternative hypotheses for 3 different values. The first one will look at the Shannon diversity and how that and time had its effect on Hurricane Juan. The second one will be the density of trees. We'll see if there was a change in the forests as it approached the climax community. And then lastly, we'll be looking at the evenness of species in Point Pleasant Park, if that had changed as it approached the climax community.
Yeah, so for the methods of this, all the data was collected at Point Pleasant Park starting in 2004, minusing a couple years due to weather events and pandemic. But besides that, it was every year, usually the last week of September to early October. And there were 6 sites that we collected in. They were the sites that were most affected by the damage from Hurricane Juan. And that was done by Bio 2060 students using a tape measure and measuring to the nearest millimeter. They measured at breast height, which is usually 4.5 feet off ground. And that gave researchers an estimate of the amount of wood within these trees, which is also a comparison to like the industry for like forestry and stuff. Like they use the same thing. So it kind of worked well with that. The intended information they were wanting to get would be the tree density, how many species were there, specific trees, and then, as I said before, the DBH. And from that data, a linear regression analysis was performed. So that was used to measure like the relationship between the variables. And then other statistical tests were the richness, the evenness, and the Shannon diversity.
So the results for the overall forest community. So in figure 1, a regression analysis was performed to determine the relationship between the Shannon diversity and the year after Hurricane Juan. The significant p-value shows that there's evidence to reject the null hypothesis that Shannon diversity and time after Hurricane Juan are not correlated. It was also found that there was a 35.91% relationship between the year and Shannon diversity. It shows that there was a weak positive relationship between the 2 variables, which can be related with the equation H prime equals 0.0685 times the year minus 136.83. Based on this information, we can conclude that Shannon diversity and time after Hurricane Juan are weakly correlated. Previous research has also shown that diversity has gone up following disturbance to an ecosystem, which shows that this is an expected result. We can see from the results that the Shannon diversity in Point Pleasant Park has gone up over time. This may be due to new species being able to colonize the area, since some species take longer to disperse. We can also predict that Shannon diversity will continue to go up as the forest approaches its climax community, and it will begin to level off. This may be due to it being an urban park, as previous research found that moderate human disturbance causes higher diversity. New species can colonize the area. That colonized area will contribute to higher Shannon diversity. But when the climax community is reached, these plants will not have the space to grow.
Yeah, so the second question that we had was measuring the density of the dominant species. So the original species that was dominant in 2004 was the red spruce, whereas now in 2024, the dominant species is the red maple. This change is likely due to what happened with the hurricane with vegetation removal and soil disturbance. And yeah, so that kind of opened up a new niche for the red maple to start growing up more rapidly. And as the forest reaches climax community, it's likely that they'll kind of even out a little bit. From what we know now, the dominant species now, red maple, is typically a pioneer species. So it grows at a much faster rate and is able to kind of adapt into like the new niche a lot quicker. And by looking at the p-values, they're both quite low. And from this value, we're able to reject the null hypothesis that there's no correlation between the two.
And lastly, as we explore the evenness of the species, looking at the species that call Point Pleasant Park home, we have seen a slight decrease in the evenness of these species over the past years since 2004. The minor change could be from the hurricane that have affected Point Pleasant Park over the years, which according to Martinez, Ruiz, and Renton, hurricanes will have more damage to areas where the trees are larger and denser compared to lesser impacts on woods that are more open and sparse. This variety of test of evenness with different areas of tests within the park could have different values given to us. And then based on this decrease, we can predict that towards the time that we reach the climax community, the dominant species will continue to take over the area, such as Elise mentioned, and this will decrease numbers of the weaker individuals that cannot compete with the dominant species. Looking at the equation that was provided to us in figure 4 of J equals minus 0.007 plus 15.1, we see a negative slope, which provides evidence that it is decreasing. And looking at the R square value, which is pretty small, 0.0228, this will provide the information and prove to us that the decrease in evenness of the slope is very insignificant.
Based on all these results, we can predict that Point Pleasant Park is in a mid to late stage of succession as the dominant species and the biodiversity are continuing to increase. As well, the evenness is still decreasing. This implies that the dominant species will continue to grow and it will limit the growth of other plants as time goes on. Previous research has found that moderate amounts of disturbance benefits communities and increases biodiversity. Succession in Point Pleasant Park may benefit from this, as biodiversity tends to increase as the community approaches later succession stages. Although this may prevent new species from colonizing the park in areas of higher disturbance. Previous research has also found that the density of the soil is affected by human traffic. This may affect which plants are able to grow in those areas, which could limit succession. although the difference between the undisturbed and moderately traveled areas was mostly down to the difference in rock content. This may, however, be significant in areas that experience heavy disturbance. And finally, we can use the Mi'kmaq concept of Netu'luik, and that can improve the way we help Point Pleasant Park recover. That's about improving the health of the community while also being sustainable with the environment. This idea can help us view the park in a more ecologically friendly manner, as opposed to the Western mind viewing it more as an economic resource.
Yeah, and we would like to thank past Bio 2060 students, the past lab instructor, Christine Beauchamp, and Mi'kmaq people for allowing us to study and learn on their land. And here are references.